Welcome to this presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Welcome to Late to the Party, a program on the Paper Street Pictures Podcast Network. Your hosts for the following are myself, Shawn Talley, and joining me for this, as he traditionally does, a fellow member of the Paper Street Pictures production team, a man who knows everything there is to know about the greatest game ever invented. He is Mr. Cameron Burns, a little less drunk than Shooter. But yeah, Cameron, welcome to Indiana basketball.
It's true. I do know more than anyone about the card game Uno. So hit me with any questions you have. And
nope, not where I thought you were going with that. That's all.
I threw you for a loop on that one.
I was waiting for some kind of Hoosiers reference or follow-up, as you have told me that you have seen this movie many a times.
I have. Well, now everyone knows we're talking about Hoosiers.
Well, see, normally with podcasts, we don't have to do resets like old school radio where we tell everybody who we're talking to because they see the article, headline, title of episode when they download.
Yeah, but don't we normally hide that until we introduce the guest? I don't care. Let's get that out of the way right now. Right. I don't care. But I just thought that was a thing that we give little hints, but we never actually, I don't think we've ever actually said in the intro what the movie is.
But we normally say it right after the first exchange or two, so we've gone past. It's too far.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
My team's on the floor, man. I don't know what to tell you. My team's on the floor. Hey,
can we just start quoting Hoosiers now? Because I love this movie and I will quote it to death.
No, before we do that, tell the folks, in case this happens to be their first episode, give a quick explainer of what we're kind of doing here.
Yeah, I can do that. So yeah, the long and short of it is everyone has kind of a blind spot movie or a few movies, big zeitgeisty movies that they haven't seen for whatever reason. It just eludes them. I mean, it's a simple numbers game. There's very few people in the world who have seen pretty much every big movie. So what we do is we reach out to someone that we like, someone that we know and that we think would make for a good conversation. And we say, hey man, what big movie haven't you seen? And inevitably they say, well, I haven't seen Lawrence of Arabia. And then they also say a couple other movies, but always Lawrence of Arabia. And then we just kind of pick one, we bring them on and we chat about it. We send them off to watch it and then we chat about it some more. And that's kind of the gist of what we're doing here.
In trying to make fetch happen, you were determined to just make Lawrence of Arabia the running bit that it's everybody's blind spot, even though I've seen it and many people we've talked to have in fact seen it. But you keep going with that one.
It has been said of the people that we have asked, Lawrence of Arabia has been said as a blind spot movie more than double any other movie.
You're not wrong. And we always talk about the length as one of the big kind of things that halts people from diving in. Nearly 4 hours. It's a meal.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those movies that people feel like they were supposed to have seen, but they just haven't seen it. Including myself, by the way. I have not seen Lawrence of Arabia. So do it as an episode one of these days.
Yeah, and the movie we are talking about, though, near and dear to your heart. And many people in the Midwest, it's one of those of, the period set Midwestern sports movie made by some of the many same folks that made Rudy later on. But yeah, we're talking about Hoosiers, Gene Hackman, Dennis Hopper. I would say it's a classic. I know it always gets ranked highly among like the sports all-time best sports movies and things like that. So where would you put this one in kind of your 80s list?
I mean, as far as 80s movie, it's probably for me a top 10 80s movie, probably a top 5 80s movie.
Wow. Okay.
I think Do the Right Thing and Raging Bull are the two best movies from the 80s, but I think you could make an argument that Hoosiers is in that 5 to 10 range. And I think for me, it's probably my favorite sports movie of all time. There are sports movies that are probably like Rocky that is like bigger in the zeitgeist, and I get why it maybe is a better quote unquote movie, but like Hoosiers kind of perfected. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but Hoosiers kind of perfected the sports movie. It like is the kind of the perfect template for how to make a sports movie.
Definitely of the underdog variety kind. Yeah, it's in that Rocky vein. My brain wanted to tangent to where you said Raging Bull and Do the Right Things because those are bookends of the beginning and into that decade. So
they are.
We'll do that another time. But Hoosiers, we're about to be joined by a gentleman we know and have a lot of fondness and respect for. So yeah, without further ado, let's actually bring him on here and ask him why he never saw this movie as someone who we know is a big sports head himself.
You sure you don't want to spoil it like you spoiled the movie that we're doing?
It's in the title of the episode.
Fine.
Joining us for this installment, he's a writer, author, screenwriter, filmmaker, podcaster, the man behind loads of great sci-fi comics, including Wasted Space and Roche Limit, as well as the sci-fi novels Black Star Renegades and We Are Mayhem. He is also the creator of the hit Vault Comics book Barbaric and has written for many a big-name comic property, including Batman, Superman, Hack Slash, Conan the Barbarian, and Star Wars. I'm sure you've heard of some of those. On top of that, He is the co-writer of Paper Street Pictures' film Revealer and the writer of Holiday Hold Up, which also marked his directorial debut. Long intro, this guy. He is one half of the Filmographers podcast, which we'll touch on later, and he is one whole of a good human being who we're glad to call a pal. He's Mr. Michael Moreci. Michael, thank you for joining us here.
Hey, thank you for having me, Shawn. Glad to be here.
I feel like a lazy bum after hearing all that. What am I doing with my life that I haven't done any of those things except podcaster and occasional filmmaker?
Yeah, you're making movies. You guys, come on.
No, we dabble.
You guys are very busy.
I'm mostly known as a podcaster now.
Well, it explains a little bit about our guest here, because one other thing about Michael Moreci, he is such a busy guy in all facets of entertainment here, and a big sports guy who even coaches youth sports. So it's a minor miracle that this gentleman has never seen the 1986 film Hoosiers.
You know, I don't know how. I don't know how I've never seen this movie. I love basketball. I live in Illinois. I'm Indiana adjacent. It is a total mystery. I love Gene Hackman. Dennis Hopper, all the ingredients are there. I just have never seen it.
We've had a lot of crazy ones so far on this show, but being lucky enough to know you a little bit outside of the podcast world, it floored me that you had not seen this. This seems like it could, I don't want to jinx it, but if you had come up to me, like, I thought it was more likely that this was your favorite movie of all time than a movie you haven't seen. Like, that's how down the middle this movie is for you. It's crazy.
I mean, it might end up being my favorite movie. We'll see. We'll find out, because I'm going to watch it. Yeah. I mean, but yeah, I've seen Bird, but not Hoosiers.
We haven't had that happen yet, Shawn, where someone leaves here with a new favorite movie. That would be exciting.
That would be cool. So we'll talk on the back half about other like larger blind spots. But for you, Michael, I mean, are there sports blind spot movies? Like, have you seen all the, Rudy, The Natural, Breaking Away, Longest Yard, The Rockies, those kind?
I have never seen Breaking Away. I've never seen The Longest Yard. I feel like I've seen at least part of the Adam Sandler Longest Yard. Does that count? I don't know.
No, it does not.
Okay, then no, I've not seen The Longest Yard.
Okay. Well, already there's homework, because Breaking Away is another of the very small niche of period set Indiana sports movies. So if you like Rudy, you end up liking Hoosiers, that'll be the recommendation to take home with.
What if I told you, Shawn, that I have also never seen Breaking Away?
Yeah, it's weird that it's got a very loyal fan base. They're small, they're quiet, but like every once in a while you'll hear people just be like, yeah, it's my favorite sports movie or my favorite movie. And it's kind of a time and place thing, I think, for some Midwesterners. But again, we'll talk about that more on the other side. But just in this era, you said you like all these things. Do you know why you missed it? Were you a kid with cable growing up, or did you just somehow avoid it? Or like how'd you come about just not catching this one sometime in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s?
Is this a homeschooled in the woods situation where you just in 86 you had to put the antenna on to be able to get Fox to come in? Is that what happened here?
I don't know. I mean, it's one of those weird things where it's like, I think maybe because, it's a period movie that maybe when I was a kid, I was like, oh man, because I was like an NBA head when I was a kid. Like I grew up on Jordan. I grew up with the Bulls. So like I was very much into the NBA, but I was very much into a very specific NBA that was, electric, with so many superstars of Olajuwon and Ewing and Barkley and Malone, Stockton, etc. So like maybe, and I'm just speculating, when I was a kid and I saw this movie about like, Indiana basketball, it just, in a period too, it just seemed boring in comparison. Maybe that's why. But I don't even remember it being on. Like I remember we had cable when I was a kid in like fits and starts, like basically when my dad was working, when he wasn't, So like I remember specific movies being on all the time. Like there are movies that I'm like, oh yeah, that was on. I remember it being on either TCM or Max or whatever. I don't remember Hoosiers. I don't remember Hoosiers even being around.
See, I remember Hoosiers, Shawn, and maybe I'm just remembering it that way because it's this kind of movie, but I remember Hoosiers as a movie that like lived on TBS. It was just one of those movies that was always on TBS at like 4 p.m. on a Sunday. Do you recall it that way? Or
yeah, no, same. I do recall it. I don't know if it was premium cable or basic cable, like you said, one of the Turner networks or something, but it definitely had a presence on TV, because while I've seen it, half a dozen times maybe over the years, I know you, Cameron, you mentioned off air, you've seen it dozens of times.
Yeah, this is probably my dad's favorite movie, or like the 1A to A Christmas Story being 1B. Like my dad, I think the era of it, the basketball of it, my dad, big sports fan, played basketball in high school. I think it reminded him of back in the day when he wore short shorts and shot jump shots without a 3-point line. I think it just like, it was, for whatever movie it was like, or for whatever reason, it was like a comfort movie for my dad. And so it was constantly on in my house. It would be one of those movies where if it was on TBS, we just watched the second half of it.
But I also get kind of what Michael's saying, though, in that era where he's watching really dynamic, flashy sports. It's like, hey, there's this movie about a bunch of Chris Mullins. You know what I mean? It's like, oh.
Hashtag Hoosiers so white.
The pasty white guys with the buzz cuts and short shorts. He's like, I'd rather watch the 90-something Bulls,
Well, it's funny, too, because like you're mentioning not having a 3-point line. I don't know if you guys watched the Olympics this year, but like literally the whole game is just threes. Like it's... it's like 80% threes, 12% breakaways, and once in a while a mid-range jumper, and that's it.
Well, if you are hearkening back to the days when people didn't shoot threes all the time and ran set plays, do I have a movie for you? It's called Hoosiers, and it goes back to a simpler time. Yes, and I am a huge basketball fan, a huge sports fan, so yeah, the 3-point line, without getting too far off on a tangent, the 3-point line every passing year becomes more and more of a thing where like in the next 20 years people will like pass out layups for 3-pointers, I think. But it's definitely coming to that.
Wild that in our lifetimes we saw football shift from first round running back base game to much more of a passing game, and in our lifetime we watched basketball go from a center based outside in to inside out to the 3-point line. It is nuts how much so. And you're right, the Olympics were such a good example of that this year.
Well, the analytics are such that like unless as the Moneyball effect kind of comes into basketball, it's one of those things where like unless you're making layups, shooting a 2-point jump shot just isn't as valuable over time as shooting a 3-point jump shot. So I think people are starting to figure that out, which is a shame because you kind of lose the post game and stuff like that. We can get more into the nitty gritty of basketball on the back end of this thing, but I do want to ask. So we kind of talked about how you missed this thing. It seems like you have a decent idea of what Hoosiers is. How much would you say you know about Hoosiers going into it?
Not much. I'm guessing, because I've sene a million sports movies, we all know there's the template, more or less. I'm guessing the program is an underdog program. Gene Hackman is maybe borderline disgraced coach who came to this team and he raises them up. And I know Dennis Hopper has like a drinking problem, I believe, in the movie. That's kind of it. That's like really the only assumptions that I can make.
Kind of a good starting point. That's kind of what the trailer would give you either way. So yeah, I think you're in the right spot.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a shame too, because before, we'll talk about it on the back end, but it's one of those things where I think Hoosiers to some degree wrote the book on what became a successful sports movie in the tropes of it. So it's one of those movies that I think will feel tropier in retrospect, but when you realize they kind of wrote the tropes, it's kind of like if you watch Halloween, you're like, oh, this is kind of a by the book slasher movie. It's like, yeah, but this is the book. Like Hoosiers is to some degree that as well. Like it's a true story that, like you said about the underdog and the disgraced coach, and like you're kind of right on with those. And like, but it kind of wrote the template to some degree that a million other sports movies ripped off or
I would argue Rocky and some other sports movies.
Well, it's not the only one. It's definitely not the only one.
Maybe not in basketball, but yeah, like it didn't break ground in that way so much, because even the reviews at the time, even Ebert's review was talking about what a tried and true formula it is. But yeah, Michael's on the right track. And I think just based on what we know about him and what he likes, I do have a decent feeling he'll come away with this with the warm, cuddly feeling that a good sports movie gives anyway.
I just got it with it's funny. I've seen the Woody Harrelson vehicle Underdogs twice. 2 times I've seen that movie, and I've seen.
You're here at the right time. You've come to us at the right time because this needs to be solved.
And I enjoyed Underdogs too. I really liked it. I thought it was really fun. I watched it once by myself, and I watched it with my kids. We all enjoyed it. It was a good, like you said, warm feeling sports movie, which I kind of can't get enough of.
You should, I so rarely say this, but you should watch this with the kids. If they like sports movies, if they're into basketball, I think this will be a winner. Like 10-year-old me was all about this movie.
Oh man. All
And
right.
I grew up in the same area you did. I mean, I was watching the Karl Malones and the Shaquille O'Neals of the world too. But yeah, this is a comfort movie for me, and I loved it as a kid. So
I don't know. I would say have him watch it, and if he takes to it, then show the kids. But that's just me.
but you know what? I'm not a parent, so I'll leave it up to you guys.
Well, I'll also probably not, I'll probably watch this whether it's school is like the only time I'll have. So by default, they'll be cut out. Although maybe we'll watch it again on a weekend because I know I gotta get cracking on this, and I desperately want to watch it. So the sooner the better, and planning with them can often be difficult. So I think I'm gonna fly this one solo and probably enjoy it more because of it, because no one will be talking to me. So that's also nice.
Yeah, that'll teach you to chime in, Mister Guy with no kids.
I'll be over here in the corner being quiet. Well, you know what? It's probably going to be your favorite movie, so you're going to watch it a few more times.
Definitely. Yes. So there we have something to look forward to. Look, if I can watch Champions twice, I can watch Hoosiers twice.
I mean, that should be on the box art. That should be like the quote on the poster.
I don't know who else watched Champions twice but me.
No, me neither.
Woody Harrelson hasn't watched Champions twice.
No, he might not watch it once.
All right, so I think we're in a good spot to adjourn, go off and watch Hoosiers, which I'm very excited about, and come back and find out how Michael sparked to it. So unless you got anything else, Shawn, I think we send him on his way and before the kids get home.
No, very much agreed. Let's do it. We'll reconvene on the other side here with Michael's fresh thoughts on the film and much more. So stay tuned. Hey there, welcome back. What was mere seconds for you, the listener, was a good deal more for us. We three individuals have made a choice to work, a choice to sacrifice, to put ourselves on the line to represent you, this this podcast. This is your team. When we last left off, our guest, Michael Moreci, had not seen Hoosiers. He was late to the party, but at least he made it. And we welcome him back now, a more cultured individual, a more learned film viewer, someone who has now seen the 1986 film Hoosiers. Michael, you feeling any or all of those things?
Oh, definitely all those things. Like we were saying, I can't believe I had this blind spot. I'm glad it's been remedied. I thought it was terrific. I'm a better person now coming out on the other side. There is no doubt about it.
Oh, I feel so good about this. I've been very concerned. I've been having a hard time sleeping, thinking you may not like this movie. And I didn't think that was going to happen, but like, there's like a little part of me. It's like, if he doesn't like it, I don't know if we can be friends anymore. So it worked out really nicely. So yeah, kind of what were your kind of initial reactions to the movie? What are your kind of top down view, the quick elevator review?
I mean, it's sort of, on one hand, I had to kind of remove myself because I think we talked about this. I don't remember if we talked about this last time or not, but like this feels, it's not like the template, but it's one of the templates for the sports movie genre, along with like I think we were saying like Chariots of Fire, Rocky. It fits into that wheelhouse. Right. And it's hard, you watch it and you're like, this is just like those other movies. But Hoosiers is one of the first of those movies. So it's kind of like you got to separate yourself from that idea of that I've seen it before, because we have seen it before, or I have seen it before, but I'm going back to like the genesis almost. And what really separates it is not when you divorce yourself, but like what also separates it. And again, I don't remember, trailers for this movie. I don't remember much of the movie outside of its existence and like very bird's eye ideas. But the thing that really struck me that I was so impressed by and really loved was that like it's really well made. Like, I mean, you have Gene Hackman, who's always, I'm a huge Gene Hackman fan. I don't know who's not. He's terrific in it. Barbara Hershey is terrific. Dennis Hopper is terrific. I mean, Dennis Hopper, maybe one of his best performances because it's so unlike a Dennis Hopper performance. In some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. It's so well shot. It's so well made. The story is, it's what you'd expect, again, with the vantage of time that we have now. But it's elevated by being so very, very well done. And I just was kind of blown away by how much I love just the pleasure of watching it for how good of a movie, not just a sports movie, but how good of a movie it is.
It's like classic filmmaking. Like there's nothing fancy about the execution. It's just a bunch of people working on a really high level and it's so affecting, where you just like watch. Last night I've seen this movie, like I said, probably 100 times, and I'm watching this last night, and all of a sudden I start tearing up in the middle, like out of nowhere, and it's just like, it's not doing anything. It doesn't feel like it's cheating to tug at the heartstrings. It executes the vision in like a near perfect manner for me.
Yeah, you know what's interesting that I was thinking, if this were made now, like this exact movie, you would almost give it credit for like subverting the own tropes that it created, because there's the beats where I was expecting like the heartwarming moment where, Hackman's going to talk to Jimmy and be like, Jimmy, the town needs you, Jimmy, like rise to the occasion. And when the actual scene is like, Jimmy, play if you want. Don't if you don't, I'm not good. I don't care. There's the scene, there's a couple small scenes with Hackman and Hopper's characters, a little bit of player coach interaction. But even he says in the movie, Hackman, he's like, well, this is where I would give the speech. And then he does it. There's a lot of subversion of like the moments where you think there's going to be that kind of stock inspirational trope, and they don't really go there. They don't really go deep into that. And it's really, it was refreshing in that way, that those tropes that exist now, I guess you can trace back to Hoosiers and think that they're there, but they're really not.
That's a fair point. There's while they have so many, this might be the first movie ever to do the slow clap, which became a trope. The guy starts clapping and everybody starts clapping, because I think they even made fun of that in not another teen movie. But I know what you mean. Like a few of them are where you're expecting that beat of the emotion. It's just like a little more straightforward, which you're right. I do appreciate that in hindsight watching it.
I think it's emotionally, like it doesn't become emotionally manipulative. Like the story beats are that of an underdog sports movie, and some of those can be considered tropey. But the emotional stuff, the acting, it never crosses over to schmaltzy. It like gets right up to the line of inspirational and never jumps across. And that probably has to do with how good Gene Hackman is. And he doesn't hit any false notes there. But yeah, it never becomes that. Underdog movies are very easy to cross over into cheesy, and this one never teeters over, to my mind, never teeters over into that.
No, it doesn't. I mean, even like, I think you can look at a perfect example of that, or a perfect representative of that, is the Hopper story arc. In the movies that we're talking about, his story arc would be completed by he gets totally sober, helps win the championship game. But instead, he's on the path to sobriety, you're assuming, when we leave him. But like, he bottoms out. He bottoms out hard. He doesn't have like that arc of like, he's at bottom, lifts up, breaks through. It's like he stumbles and goes back down and he's kind of back on the rise when we end. But like, they would never make a movie now where his character is not present at the championship game.
Yeah, the scene with the son looking over at him and the whole thing. I agree.
Totally. Would you say they don't make them like they used to?
I would say, you know what? Another point that is on my mind, that exactly to that point of they don't make them like they used to. Like, guys, do you remember when movies had like seasons in them? Not like the seasons we have now of sunny and night. Like they had like actual honest to goodness, like the movie starts in fall and it looks gorgeous. Just the fall, the opening sequence of the driving and the leaves. And it looks like, I live in Illinois. It looks like the best parts of Indiana and the Midwest. And it's so very, very beautiful. Such a fall setting feeling. And then it moves into winter, and then it's snow and there's frost on the crops and stuff like that. There's actual honest to goodness seasons in this movie. We never get seasons in movies anymore. Rarely. I remember in Knives Out, the first Knives Out, where I was like, oh my God, this take place in fall. It's a season. That's how much it stood out to me, that it's so rare.
It's funny you say that, because it's not something I think I've ever thought of, but like it is very rare, because I'm trying to think of other movies and I'm just like, yeah, you don't really get seasons. You just get like day or night. And this you definitely feel that in a very Midwest, because I don't live in the Midwest anymore, but I lived in Illinois for a few years, and like you feel that like fall to winter is like a big transition, and it goes from, leaves changing and beautiful out to like sludge and snow and dark. And like this movie does kind of hit those two seasons perfectly. It feels very much like a movie written by people from the Midwest, directed by people from the Midwest, because this movie was written and directed by people from the Midwest. Director David Anspaugh, writer Angela Pizzo were actually college roommates at the University of Indiana. And so they know with which they speak.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's an interesting fact. That's really cool. Yeah, that it definitely, the authenticity absolutely comes across because, yeah, I mean, you're right. And that's a basketball season. Basketball starts in fall. Yep. High school basketball starts in fall and ends sometime, theirs extended, of course, because they, had the regional sectionals championship, et cetera. But yeah, it's fall and then goes into winter and then that's it.
Yeah, you're talking to two people who grew up mostly of their life, at least in the bottom half of the United States, where there's not a ton of seasons. But it's a good point that you point out because, like you said, it's either every movie that takes place in Australia, they show it just balls hot, middle of summer. Every movie that has a scene in Russia, it's like balls cold, snow everywhere.
Right.
There's kind of no in between. Like the Holdovers last year had very wintry feeling, but nowadays you're right with the volume and the green screening and the CGI. It's like, oh no, it's just daytime or nighttime. There's no season about it necessarily. But to Cameron's point, so the director and writer also collaborated for Rudy a few years later. But Anspaugh, to Michael's point about no one's ever not loved Gene Hackman, the guy who directed this had a huge fallout with Hackman throughout this movie. So Anspaugh had directed Hill Street Blues, St. Elsewhere's, a couple Miami Vice episodes, but he never kind of reached the height in film again. But he certainly was somewhat prolific in kind of highbrow TV shows. Hackman got on set like day one and just ran down this director and was like a shithead to him from jump. And I guess they patched up over the years, but to this day, he said like, yeah, Hackman made my life hell, to the point where even when he had to come in for ADR at the end, Hackman's like, no, send me the movie. It's got to be good if you want me to come in. And Hackman was actually blown away by how good the movie turned out. He was flabbergasted because he thought he was making something terrible with a guy with no taste and kind of ran him down commonly, turned Barbara Hershey on him too on set. So I don't know what he came off of to walk into this movie, but he certainly was a nightmare for the director. But again, end of the day, movie came out well. Everybody was better for it.
Yeah, Hackman was convinced that this movie was going to be a piece of shit, basically from Jump Street. Like he felt like it was going to be like a TV movie, and this director didn't like have style. And some could argue that the movie doesn't have a ton of style, but that's almost its style. But yeah, he was very much convinced that it was not going to work out, and was shocked when it did. They patched it up a little bit, but yeah, it was not a fun set to be on by most accounts.
Yeah, which is a bummer because I'm sure we all know that is not the lone Gene Hackman was a monster story that exists. Like his persona, it's funny, is not always, but he has and can have in film such warmth. He has a great laugh. He has a great smile. Like he delivers those lines with a laugh and a smile, especially the early lines to Barbara Hershey. And it's just vintage Gene Hackman warmth. But he is often not that guy behind the scenes. So I'm not surprised, but I'm always still disappointed to hear those kind of stories. I'd be interested to see a few things. Like what was he? I don't know where he's at in his career. Obviously, this is post 70s, where he's doing, his night moves and French Connection, etc. But I don't think he was at like some sort of nadir either. Like I don't know that he was at like a bottom place where he was taking whatever and took this gig and didn't need it for a paycheck, which makes me curious, like why he chose it. If he felt,
well, he also, I can answer that for you. He also wasn't on a particularly good run. So it's funny that this was the one, and maybe he was like this on the earlier ones, but yeah, he was huge in the 70s, and Lex Luthor and Superman in 1980 or 78 and then 80 was huge, but he had done All Night Long in 81, Reds in 81, Eureka in 83, Under Fire in 83, Two of a Kind in 83, and nobody's heard of any of these. Like he'd done Uncommon Valor in 83, which is a solid movie, Misunderstood, Twice in a Time, Target, a movie called Power, which is actually not bad, but like that was the run he was on pre-Hoosiers. And then in 86, he did Hoosiers, which kind of catapulted him back into making some better movies, into like the Mississippi Burnings and in that era of this. So like, yeah, he read this one wrong. He had done a few movies that didn't really break out, and then this would be the one that would kind of shoot him back into orbit. But what if I told you that we came very close to this movie having Jack Nicholson in the lead? He wanted to do it. he was all set to do it, and then he ended up in a lawsuit with MGM that kept him from working for like 6 months. So with his blessing, they kind of just moved on without him and went out to Hackman. But this was a movie that Jack Nicholson wanted to do. The movie wanted Jack Nicholson, and if not for him in a lawsuit with MGM, we would have seen Nicholson in the lead, and would have been a much different movie probably. And one could argue whether it would be better or worse, but it would certainly be interesting if nothing else.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I know that. I mean, first of all, that run of movies, I didn't know. Yeah, that's a pretty dire run. We forget that he made like a lot of like weirdly anonymous action movies. That's, you know, you wouldn't think that Gene Hackman's in, but he's made them, and they're not good. So yeah, I mean, I guess he is on a bad streak. So yeah, I can see him coming into Hoosiers without a lot of enthusiasm, potentially a first early, TV director. So I mean, it still doesn't, give justification for him being a terrible person, but the context does help. But yeah, I mean, like Nicholson, I don't know. What do you guys think? I feel like it could still work. I mean, he doesn't obviously have the warmth that Hackman can portray, but still interesting, especially at that time.
I think it would have been a quirkier role for him. I think what Hackman has so well here that I don't see Nicholson having is that kind of coach lack of warmth with warmth hidden underneath. Like, he's got very much a my way or the highway drill sergeant-y attitude. And I don't it's harder to picture Nicholson, not kind of smiling through it and goofing through it. Not that Nicholson can't be serious. He can. He's one of the best actors on the planet. But he doesn't have that kind of like Norman Dale, the Gene Hackman version. He just feels like a coach. He just feels like the kind of guy who on the outward is a curmudgeon, but on the inside, all he wants is to see his players do well. Like, Hackman just has that kind of grumpy everyman quality that I'm not sure Nicholson has.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the key word, that everyman, Nicholson is not, it doesn't portray everyman, I mean, he's one of the best, there's no doubt, but like being able to slide into that kind of folksy down home Indiana guy. Yeah. I mean, not that he's from Indiana, but like fitting into this town, you just can't see Nicholson really fitting into this town and coming back next season and getting married to Barbara Hershey's character, I guess, presumably something like that. That's a little bit harder to digest then.
It's hard to picture Barbara Hershey just coming out like minute one, just being a huge bitch to Nicholson, and he's like smiling and being charismatic, and she's just like, because she comes in with like, fuck this guy attitude. Barbara Hershey, I had forgotten, you watch this so many times, but there's still stuff you don't remember. I had forgotten how, like, from Jump Street, she is just like mean as hell to him. Right. And she wins him over, and he wins her over, I guess is a better way to put it. But like, yeah, I had kind of forgotten that she was very much a stick in the mud.
Yeah, her walls are all up the second he enters frame. She's like, no, don't look at me, don't touch me, don't talk to me.
100%. It takes like half the movie for her to even be nice to him, but she's great in it. But yeah, she's coming in hot.
A guy like Nicholson could win her over, but I'm with you. I'm going all the way through like his 70s run, his 80s run, his 90s run, and even when he plays as stoic as possible, he's a bit like Downey Jr., where like he can't turn down that charisma sometimes. Like he just has it. Even in Oppenheimer, like Downey was like told, don't do anything you do that's very Robert Downey, and like there's still a little bit of it. You almost can't hide it. Nicholson has that a bit too, where he doesn't do stoic as easily, I guess. And Hackman pulled off that stoic coach thing, like you said. The vibe was much more coached, and not that I don't think Nicholson could pull it off. It just would be a very different movie, like you said.
Yeah, and also you need somebody who's rough around the edges, because I don't know if you noticed this, but Gene Hackman gets kicked out of, I don't know, every third game in this movie. Very rarely does Gene Hackman see the fourth quarter in this movie. That dude is getting kicked out.
Deliberately tells the referee to kick him out of one of the games.
That's one of my favorite moments. Well, I guess you got your reasons. I said, like, he is just getting booted left and right, man. He is just like Bobby Knight incarnate.
Yeah, he gets very. There's got to be some sort of record there.
Indiana basketball tradition of being a jackass coach.
That's true. He's following it.
You be careful with that Bobby Knight slander. Aaron B. Kuntz will shut this podcast down.
I think with some distance, he's realized that he might not have been the best guy, as funny as he may have been in Outburst.
He won basketball games, and when you're in Indiana, that goes a long way.
Yeah, and he's problematic now, especially we find him especially problematic. But like nobody gave a post game the way Bobby Knight gave a post game. Like
he's good for a soundbite. He's good for a quote.
Yes, he is.
So what did you? I'm curious. Michael, as a sports fan, I know you are, as well as Shawn and I. Like, what did you think of the basketball? Like, how did you think it felt, and did it feel kind of? I mean, obviously, the game's changed a lot since the '50s, but how did you think the actual? Because it drives me nuts in sports movies when people can't play the sport, obviously. Yeah. And I'm curious what you think of the actual talent on display here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. Like, I've seen, I'm sure you have as well, like sports movies that are like, look, it's tricky. It's got to be really, really difficult to shoot a sports movie, to like cut it, to make it fluid. Completing like a play in football on film has got to be very hard. Like, it's not like you can just do what, Fox Sports does and just get super high and wide and say, here's the play. That's not dynamic. It's not cinematic. So you have to figure out other ways, and it makes it really hard. And you're also working with people who most likely, and maybe not most likely, but a good possibility, cannot throw a football or shoot a basketball or, so there's a lot of challenges there. But I thought that Hoosiers looked great. Like, I did some digging, and I found like some people who are unhappy about like the montages. They do a lot of montages, but like, I don't know how else you really are able to, one, condense time, in terms of like however long games are. I don't know, I'm guessing like 4 quarters, 12 to 15 minutes each, however many games they play. That's a lot of basketball. That's happening.
Can we sidebar real quick? I don't know how anybody knew how much time was left in the game with that circular looking clock.
Oh my God.
It just spun around. I don't know how anybody knew how much time was in the game. How many times does that thing spin? Is there I had so many questions about that. If we have any listeners who played basketball in 1951, which seems unlikely now that I said it out loud. Can you let me know how that thing works? Because I was very confused by that. Anyway, sorry, I didn't.
When we finally got a digital clock, I think it was a regional game. I was like, oh, thank God.
Yes.
But no, I mean, the kids. There was the one scene that that I referenced before, where Hackman goes to visit Jimmy, the best player, and he's shooting hoops. And then for the most part, they just stay in a wide oneer, cuts to the ball in the hoop once in a while. Mm-hmm. But Jimmy's clearly shooting continuously very good jump shots.
Yeah, Jimmy could stroke it. Like that's obvious from the movie. Like he can flat shoot it.
Yes. Yeah. That kid, whoever played him, that actor can shoot. But the action overall, I found pretty compelling. I mean, they're doing basketball plays. There's some backdoors. They were picking. They were doing basketball stuff. I mean, maybe it didn't always look perfect, but like at least whoever was, directing the action, and it might have been, sorry, what's the director's name again?
David Ansbach.
David Ansbach had some knowledge of basketball and like running some plays and filming what a basketball game looks like. It wasn't just like people running up the court and like throwing the ball and then you cut to the hoop and it's like squish,
Yeah, that's the worst is like, and I think, I think the montages do a lot of work here, not only because I think the score is so good over top of the montage that it really gets you excited, but I think like the montage is like a great way to watch the game and fast forward here and kind of get the gist of what's going on, and just kind of, it feels very much like we're watching the game on like 5 times speed. And every once in a while we hit like play and go to regular speed, and Gene Hackman yells at a referee and gets kicked out. And then we go back into fast forward. Like, I think it does a good job of like skipping past the irrelevant stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And there was enough, like I said, there's just enough authenticity where there was a charge in there at some point that was like, yeah, that looks like a charge, that looks like what it's supposed to look like. So at least having the knowledge of being able to convey what happens in a basketball game. And like you said, the montages stitch it together pretty well. I enjoyed it. I mean, I thought it worked. I forget who the hot-headed kid was, the lefty, like he looked like he can play some ball. There was, it was the great moment where the granny shot, free throws, like you can buy it, it looked the way it was supposed to look. I mean, there's no dunking, there's no threes, which I was like, geez, man, what would the score be? There's so many long jumpers in this game. Like how many 3-pointers would they have here? A lot. But like, I thought from a sports point of view, it really worked. And I'm sure you guys would agree, I have seen a lot worse.
Oh, yeah. This happens with everything. People who know how to shoot guns watch movies and critique that, or an archer will see somebody poorly using a bow and arrow in a movie. The sports one, it's usually egregious on like CW shows where there's like a football player and you see him actually throw the football off camera and you're like, oh, that man's never thrown a football before.
Baseball movies are really bad offenders of this too. Like swinging a bat and throwing a baseball.
Yeah, man. Spend 10 minutes just teaching the kid how to do a stance. Like, I'm telling this to a youth baseball coach, and Michael here, but he knows. Just teach the kid a stance really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I just watched Next Goal Wins. And I don't think I've ever been more offended in my life.
Right. Well, we talk about like the visual accuracies of the sports on film, which they did a pretty good job, especially considering the period. But let's run through, because this movie has a couple of accuracies and a boatload of inaccuracies that, were fudged for dramatic effect. But the one thing that did happen is the famous story is that the coach did go and measure the height of the hoop and measure the distance to the free throw line when they played in the big game, just to kind of put the team at ease, which is a very cool moment. I'm glad they put that in the movie. And then the announcer at the final game in the film is Hillard Gates, who was the real 1954 championship game announcer. And that's about where the accuracy stop. So, again, it's a movie, dramatic effect, lots of stuff. So Hickory is a fictional town. The real version were the Milan Indians. The real coach was not actually...
Hold on, let me stop you right there. That's Milan. Milan Indians. How dare you?
Milan, sorry. The real coach was not actually an older guy. He was a 26-year-old recent Butler grad. He did take them to the semifinals in the first year, but it was the second year where they went all the way. But again, that's fine to fudge that for the movie for immediacy. And the town really was behind him, which in this movie, they do get behind him, of course, especially when Jimmy comes out and backs him as well. The star player sitting out was fudged for the thing. The romance with the teacher was fudged. The real coach was actually married. Shooter himself is not based on anyone. And that coach had never punched anyone in his past. But again, these are all just things
you know of.
No recorded.
He never punched a player. I'm sure he punched somebody. A couple other interesting facts. One, that run became known as the Milan Miracle. It was a huge deal. It still is a huge deal in Indiana. They played the 50th anniversary of that game was on ESPN about 10, 15 years back. And there was like 50,000 people there or something crazy. But another fun fact is that the real Hoosiers team, that Milan Indians team, on their way to that title, beat Crispus Attucks High School in the semifinals that year. That team was led by a young Oscar Robertson, whose team would then go on to win the next two state titles.
There you go.
So nice. I think it was like sophomore Oscar Robertson, but they a lot of people incorrectly think the team in the finals was the Oscar Robertson team. That is not correct. It was the semifinals, which is a game we do see, but I don't think that was still showed to us in the movie as like a team of white guys. I don't think you see a black person in this movie until the finals. But no, Oscar Robertson was on the team they beat in the semifinals. So they did not get an easy draw. Let's put it that way.
Right. No. No.
But yeah, so a lot of stuff made up for movies as you would expect, but the actual run that they went on and the unlikeliness of that run in a school with that few people is by and large correct.
Right. So, still a true underdog story for sure.
Yeah. And also, it's funny for a movie that I think is kind of amazing. There's not a lot of recognizable cast here. I mean, we've talked about Gene Hackman, we've talked about Barbara Hershey, we've talked about Dennis Hopper, who was nominated for an Oscar. But outside of those three, you've got some really great character actors doing some really good work here. But like, they're really the only three people, even in retrospect, that with any kind of name value, which is interesting. A lot of times we go back and a movie this popular has launched a bunch of careers, but it's really not the case in this one.
Yeah, I was kind of not curious, but I did notice that. I was surprised that like nobody else was really there. Even there wasn't really any young actors who that they picked up to slide into any of the player roles. Because I don't recognize anybody. I mean, I'm sure maybe somebody went on to do something, but nobody broke out. None of the young.
If this was made now, it would be nothing but like CW kids in the movie, and then it'd be exactly what we were talking about, where like they can't shoot at all. Right. They look like they've never picked up a basketball. But yeah, I think the kids were cast kind of equally on their ability to play the game as act. And also like there's not a lot of, when you look at it for a movie that's about kids playing basketball, there's not a lot of interactions with them. There's not a ton of lines with the kids. The George, Dennis Hopper's son, kind of has the most meat on the bone, but they're very smart in the way they kind of stick to the strengths of those kids and they don't have them doing monologues.
Yeah, which goes kind of to again to the trope breaking in a way because like yeah, you don't really get like the kid who needs to overcome. I'm trying to think of some. There's the banal cliches, and granted, they don't replace it with something innovative that makes them unique. It just kind of just gives them enough to be like, this is the hot-headed one, and this is the religious one, and this is the good one.
This is the kid who D's up on people. This is the kid who you got like the point guard, the defensive player, the second guy that can shoot. It does a good job of giving you just enough to be able to tell them apart without having them become. It is very much a movie about Gene Hackman, Barbara Hershey, and Dennis Hopper.
Which is such an interesting paradigm shift because it's like the type of movie we don't get that much anymore, which is there's a lot of conversations about this. I'm not, inventing any wheel here, but like it's a movie about adults, like, and just adults. It's not a movie that's trying to capture the demographic of everyone. I mean, granted, anyone can watch this movie. I am going to watch it with my kids. We talked about it before. I would show this with my kids and they would love it, but it's not like we need to get, I don't know, whatever the CW equivalent or Disney equivalent to what Zac Efron was 10 years ago. Like we need to get a really good role for that Zac Efron, whatever equivalent, and give him something to do so we can get this demographic. Like the kids are there. They matter for the team, and they have, like you said, Cameron, enough, and that's it. And the rest of it is about these characters, the adults.
Indeed. Not a single one of the students or the players went on to any kind of other major role, but the other couple adults in the movie that are notable, Sheb Woolley played Cletus Summers. He was in a handful of iconic just Western movies, Western TV shows, Rawhide, High Noon, Giant, Rio Bravo, Outlaw Josie Wales. And then Chelsea Ross, who played George, that man is like character actor Hall of Fame.
Are you saying Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?
There you go.
I was wondering when we get to Eddie Harris.
Untouchables, Last Boy Scout, Major League, Basic Instinct, a handful of Sam Raimi movies. But yeah, Chelsea Ross, you'll know the guy if you don't recognize him by name. If you see his face, people will be oh yeah, that guy.
Up your butt, Joe Boo. Like
probably my favorite character in Major League. That guy so like 60. Talk about another thing where like getting sports right. That like 60-year-old guy who was his arm constantly hurt and he was using like every trick in the book. Like that character is so good. Also, kind of rounding out the cast, you had Fern Parsons, who played Opal Fleener, the mom of Barbara Hershey. Didn't go on to a lot of stuff, but she did have another big sports classic moment as Annie's mom in Field of Dreams. So she's 2 for 2 on sports movies.
There you go.
She definitely, and she's great in this movie as like the mom who's really warm and loves basketball, and she really kind of holds the movie together, I think, in a lot of ways. She's what makes the Hackman Hershey relationship kind of work.
Yeah, she was good. Everybody who's in it was solid, whether I knew who they were or not. I found everyone to be performance-wise played their roles and played them really well.
No, I definitely agree with that. Did you have a favorite line, a favorite quote? I always love to ask people that. Was there something that stuck out to you as just like, I've got hundreds from this movie that we could talk all night, but I'm curious what lines kind of jumped out at you.
One that I think it was Shawn. I think you already said it's like, well, I guess you have your reasons when he gets thrown out.
Oh, so good.
Is pretty great. Yeah, I mean that one that stood out to me. That was really, really laughing. I love that moment. I mean, I'm sure, watching it again and again, I surely would. What are some of your guys?
Cam, I'll let you go because I got a few.
The one, so as I said in kind of the open on this, my dad used to watch, it was one of his favorite movies, he used to watch it all the time. My dad would always walk, just apropos of nothing, would just be like walking around and all of a sudden out of nowhere just go, no school this small's ever been to the state championship. Just like hit you with it, even when you're not watching the movie, just like you get up to go to the bathroom and that's what you hear in like the other room. So that's one that always landed for me. But I'm also a big fan of the stuff with Strap, the religious kid, and his prayer. I love Coach Dale's got a couple of great one-liners where Strap's praying when he needs to check in, and he says, "Strap, God wants you on the floor." It's a great line. One of mine. And then when Strap's praying with Ollie before the free throws, he says, "Make it a good one, Strap." Those two are always among my favorites. I also love My Team's on the Floor. I think that's the first kind of, this coach is awesome. Like he's like that he's gonna not let it play with 4 is just such a good. I don't even know if the line's great, but it's such a good moment when he doesn't let the kid who didn't pass
Mhm.
go back in the game when the other guy fouls out. I love that.
Yeah. Barbara Hershey's mom, as you talked about, Opal, she tells him, "Sun don't shine on the same dog's ass every day, but mister, you ain't seen a ray of light since you got here." She's like the opposite of the daughter. She's like the warmth and, like you said, helps bring them together in a weird way. But Norman, to Barbara Hershey, saying, if everyone was as nice as you, country hospitality is going to get an awful name. Because, she hits him with the brick wall.
She came in hot.
And it's not so much the line of just the succinctness of it, but when the preacher gives that final little sermon to them, all he does is just quote the exact David and Goliath passage, and I've always loved that. He just walks in, says, David put his hand in the bag, took out a stone and slung it, and struck the Philistine in the head, and he fell to the ground. Amen.
Amen. Yeah, that very on the nose, but lands so perfectly in that moment. Also, I forgot there's one more great strap line where, and this is my dad was also a basketball coach when I was a kid, and he would always coach us, and he would use this line on people, including myself, where the strap checks in and knocks down a couple buckets, unexpected buckets. And coach, they call the timeout. Coach says, "What's gotten into you?" Strap says, "The Lord. I can feel his strength." And Coach Norman Dale says, and much like my dad has said to me many times, "Well, then keep your strength in the dribble." That's a line that he liked to use to tell me to stop shooting. Keep your strength in the dribble. But yeah, there's so many kind of great lines. There's I wouldn't call it one line as much as an interaction, but when the coach and the George character, who's the coach before he shows up, when they have their little back and forth about who's actually running the team. And then the guy starts to walk away and he's like, "Leave the ball, will you?" I love that. Like, that's such a great line too.
Your coaching days are over.
Your coaching days are over. Yeah, I could go on for hours about.
It's a good script. It's a sharp script. I mean, like it's really just, that ultimate writing goal of just being clean and clear. And it's absolutely like clean and clear without being heavy-handed. It doesn't try to ever hide its point or hide its agenda or hide what it is. It's very just, this is what the movie is. We know what it is, and we're giving you what it is fully.
They don't make them like they used to.
They don't make them like they used to, man. They really.
Speaking of, they don't make them like they used to. The minute that Orion logo comes up, I think you just know you're in good hands. Like, I miss that '80s Orion logo. You just know things are going to go good the minute that pops up.
No kidding, man. Talk about a time capsule.
Oh, it's so good. Did you know this movie?
Safer bets of the '80s. I agree.
Absolutely. So this movie was nominated for 2 Oscars. Didn't win either, but Dennis Hopper was nominated for supporting actor, and Jerry Goldsmith was nominated for the score, which is, I think, absolutely deserved. I think like the score kind of carries the basketball scenes. I think without the score, those montages would feel like a lot, because there is a bunch, but the score is so propulsive that you don't even feel it. It's pretty crazy.
No, I mean, it's such a classic 80s score where it's like, it's big, it's a big score, There's nothing understated about that score. And when you're supposed to feel something, the music's like, time to feel something. And I'm fine with that. I love it. A good Jerry Goldsmith, like classic score, I'm always in for. And that's a really good one. Yeah. The basketball's good. The character coming in for character is really good. Like it is a very, very solid score.
What did you think? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I have to chime in here. I'm never negative about stuff like this either. I love Jerry Goldsmith, Planet of the Apes, Alien, Omen, Star Trek, Gremlins. Come on. He's amazing. And Rudy is amazing. I felt like this was the one time where like there's a faintness of Rudy going on here, but I felt like the 80s synth of it was not great. I didn't think this was one of his terribly great ones. I was actually shocked that it got nominated for an Oscar. I couldn't believe I didn't take to it the way you both did. And I love him and I love movie scores in general, but this one, every time it would kick up, it felt like an 80s drama series intro. And I hate to be the negative Nancy here, but that's how I felt when that score would kick up.
Man,
well,
Gene Hackman on us.
Yeah, I mean, there's no accounting for taste.
You all have no taste.
That's a real Barbara.
Don't get me wrong. Hey, I'll be proven wrong in the end because you guys will be right.
Because it was nominated for an Oscar. That was a real Barbara Hershey-esque response you had there, just coming in with negativity. And this is a positivity podcast.
I said that with a lot of qualifiers, man. I love Jerry Goldsmith. This score just didn't do it for me personally. But
it's funny. I'm not a big score guy. Like, obviously, I say that not as someone who doesn't understand how they work in movies. Like I love a good score as much as next, but I'm not someone who knows all the composers. Is like Shawn, you're much more in the score world. Like you listen to that stuff outside. I never listen to scores like outside of movies, stuff like that. But I've always been a big fan of this score. I do think it's not particularly subdued.
Not bad. It's not bad anyway.
But I feel like it does the job. It does the job. What this movie needs is this movie needs a bigger score because it doesn't have the actual movie and the acting and the script are not doing all that work. Like they're understated, and the score I think needed to be a little more in your face, especially with all those, especially in the montages. I think like without the score in those montages, they would have felt really repetitive, probably.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. And like I said, it's big. I like
you. You have won me over. I will go to dinner with you, like Myra Cleaner did with Gene Hackman.
You have really brought this podcast down, and it's a sad time.
Let's bring him back up. Let's start winding it down. We have some questions for Michael, and then we want him to explain some stuff to us. So I'm glad you liked it. We thought for sure we've had some serious concerns about a few people in the movies they picked, but you're a Midwestern guy, and I think you're just attuned to period set Midwestern sports movies. So we're very glad you took to this one. I do hope your kids can take to it as well. It's got kind of, like you said, all the right beats, and hopefully it'll be a little inspirational for them too. But before we let you go, we've mentioned a few blind spots off air and on air. So any other gigantic blind spots for you, whether it's like sports movies or just Midwestern movies, period movies, any genre you kind of have a larger blind spot in?
It's funny. I was just talking to somebody and I was like, oh my God, I've never seen that. And what was the movie we were talking about? Because they were like, what? I know one of my big blind spots that I keep meaning to reconcile is All That Jazz. I need to see All That Jazz. Like, I don't know why I have. I love Roy Scheider. I don't know why I haven't seen this movie. So like coming top of mind, All That Jazz. I really need to see All That Jazz.
Watch Jaws instead.
I haven't seen. Is that good?
That one's pretty good. Jaws. You should see that one. The kids like that one. So I have a question that is off the blind spot, more of a sports movie thing. Where now, having seen Hoosiers, which is on most people's top 5 to 10 sports movies, give or take, where would you say this lands in the lexicon of sports movies? Lexicon's not the right word there. Where do you think this movie lands kind of in the sports movie realm as far as being one of the great sports movies ever made, potentially? ?
Oh, I mean, definitely one of the greats. Easy. I think it's slam dunk. Those weren't allowed then, or they just hadn't been invented then. I don't know, but nobody did it. It's a layup then. We'll keep it in the correct period. It's a layup.
Best basketball movie ever made?
I don't know.
Hoop Dreams is the other one that people always bring up.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of whatever.
Different kind of movie, obviously. That's Hoop Dreams is the other one.
I can't. I really can't think of another really. Yeah, I mean, Blue Chip a little because I like Friedkin, but Blue Chip's also, to be fair, not very good. I just like.
I love that you're like, what other great basketball movies? Well, Blue Chips is another great basketball movie. I mean, it's not good, but it's great. Which is exactly how I feel about Blue Chips. Like, it's not a good movie. It's the opposite of Hoosiers.
It's watchable, and it's
not a good movie, but it's kind of great in its own way. Also, the SATs are culturally biased. I learned that from Blue Chips.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So, yeah, it gave us something. It gave us some Nick Nolte being Bobby Knight, going back to Bobby Knight. I don't know any great basketball movies. I mean, my pantheon of sports movies, it's early. I would put it up there, though. Like, I mean, it's up there. Like Major League, I think, is my favorite sports movie. Speaking of Eddie Harris, I just can't get enough of Major League. I think it's hilarious. I think
it is great.
Infinitely quotable. Shit, I've been cut already.
You may run like Mays, but you hit like shit.
Yeah.
It's been some years since I've seen that. I got to revisit Major League.
I wish more people knew that, so I could, like, when something bad happens, I always want to say, like, shit, I've been cut already.
Oh, it's so good.
But I did. Yeah. I mean, it's a movie I will be watching again. And I mean, what is I don't want to go too deep because we could be here all day, but what is the pantheon of sports movies? I mean, it's like that.
I think I will say
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Cam. More often than not, Rocky and Raging Bull end up near the top because of the boxing of it. All those are usually considered the best. But, you'll see The Natural sometimes. You'll see Breaking Away. You'll see
Field of Dreams, Raging
Dreams.
or Bull Durham.
Bull Durham, yeah.
Oh, Bull Durham. Bull Durham is, for me, definitely, I think Bull Durham is honestly one of the best American screenplays ever written. White Man.
So good.
Basketball. White Man Can't Jump.
That's true. Longest Yard is a good one. Slapshot is a good one.
Miracle.
Miracle I really loved. That's when I was in film school, I always talked about wanting to make a movie about the Miracle on Ice, and they beat me to it. But I always thought there was a really great movie in that, and they did a good job with it.
Well, they made Miracle you can make on ice. So you can.
That's true. The sequel to Miracle on Ice.
Exactly.
On Ice.
They only made part of it, right?
It's the making of Miracle called On Ice.
So the other thing we want to talk about with Michael before we let him go is he has a podcast of his own. Cameron and I have listened to many an episode. And I want you, Michael, if you don't mind, tell the folks about it if you want to plug it for us.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, it's called the Filmmakers Podcast. It's the show where myself and my partner, Kier Graff, who's also a writer, also a big film nerd like me, we are studying a director's career, one film at a time for an entire season. And our first season we're studying Steven Soderbergh. So we started at Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and we are going all the way. I mean, Soderbergh's never going to stop. But right now, ostensibly, we'll be going through the last movie that he's currently slated to release would be Presence in next year. He's got Black Bag and Presence both coming out next year.
Have you considered season 2 being something with a little less movies, like maybe the Jordan Peele season, just sort of really buzz through it?
Yeah, many seasons between your long seasons, like Ari Aster, Jordan Peele. Movies that John Cazale was in, like tiny little increments.
John Cazale was in. All best picture. All best picture.
Who directed Night of the Hunter? That's our next season.
Charles Naughton? Is that right?
Yes, it is right. Yeah, Charles Naughton. Yes.
Good pull, Cam. That's good.
Thank you.
In it.
Thank you.
But yes, it's this podcast is very good. Cameron and I vouch for it. It is well produced, well researched, unlike this show. They do a very good job putting it together.
Oh, thank you. You guys do a great job too. I mean, I think we all are movie nerds, and definitely I can say Kier and I we script every episode. We research a ton. It's funny. Before we started, before we released our first episode, we had at least, I think it was like 10 in the can. And we were like, well, surely, we'll never catch up, and we caught up because it takes, it just takes a lot.
It's funny. I'm listening, as I told you earlier, I'm listening to the Traffic episode right now. And as you guys were kind of bantering back and forth, Kier was like, yeah. And I've watched the Traffic now like 3 times to get ready for this episode. And I was like, wow, this man is way more dedicated to his podcast than I am. Because I watched Hoosiers at 2 a.m. last night in order to talk about it today. He's like, oh, I've watched Traffic, a 2.5-hour movie 3 times for this. I'm like, wow, these guys are professionals. We're just out here winging it, Shawn, with like a 1-page document.
Well, speak for yourself. I'm the one that writes up all this stuff.
I'm winging it.
It's all good. But you're the color commentator. Let's be honest. I'm just kind of steering your color. This is the guest.
Well, we switched roles here, and we each take we just did the Girlfriend Experience and the Informant. We recorded those this week, and Kier will be running point. He ran point on the Girlfriend Experience, so he watched that I don't know how many times, 7 or 8 probably, knowing Kier. And I did the Informant. So I'll write that script. He'll write the Girlfriend Experience script, and we bounce it back and forth with each other. But we lessen each other's loads by being by switching also, and it also makes it fun because I can be the color commentary for this and he can be for that, and so on and so forth. But yeah, we've gotten Soderbergh books. I have listened to I don't know how many Soderbergh interviews now, and just constantly pulling quotes and okay, here he's talking about this movie and marking this clip. He's talking about, okay, finally, we got some stuff on Che. I can come back to this. And the Criterion extras that I've watched, my God, I've spent so much time on Criterion extras. God bless them for putting out a Criterion.
The more you talk, I think Cameron's idea is really solid. You take somebody with 5 or less as your tweener seasons. That way you're not killing yourselves, and you give yourself a little more of a break.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
Jordan Peele, like of those, that ilk is like not the worst idea, but that's our opinion. You do.
Also, to be clear, Shawn, I don't want to be the adult. You can be the adult on every episode. I just want to be the guy that rolls in and says funny things, hopefully. Also, Michael, because I know you're a busy man and a multi-hyphenate of many different disciplines. You got anything else you want to plug and promote other than the podcast? I know you're doing a lot of stuff.
Well, Salient to Movies is the movie that I have coming out later this year that I co-directed and wrote called Holiday Holdup. I'm actually not sure right now where exactly it's being released. I do know it's coming out this year. It's a Christmas film, so it's coming out for the holiday season. I just don't know where, but there is a trailer online that you can watch. It's out there right now, and it will be out within the next 2 to 3 months. And it's really fun. It's actually, I've stole a lot from Soderbergh. This is before I even started the podcast, but there's a lot stolen from in Ocean's 11, Logan Lucky. It's a holiday crime comedy that is just, I think, a lot of fun. It's a great cast, a really, really great cast that really brought that thing together. So Holiday Holdup is coming soon.
So all I heard was the interiors will be very, very blue. The outsides will be very, very yellow. And the traffic vane. No, we will not only promote, we'll link to, like in paperstreetpodcast.com on the show notes, we'll link to the podcast. We'll definitely link to a trailer to the movie and some other stuff. If you have a link tree or some links you can send us, we will drop those in the show notes. But yes, we do appreciate your time. We know you have a heart out here shortly, but before we go, we also have to inform you, because you are a filmmaker, you have become the 4th Triple Crown winner, is how Cameron phrases it, in that you are a person who has been a guest on the Paper Street podcast, a guest on Late to the Party, and the thing that not everybody has done, you are now the 4th. You have worked on a Paper Street film in Revealer, so you're joining that exclusive club alongside Emily Higgins, Alex Cuervo, and Emily Bennett. So congrats to you.
Hold for applause.
You win nothing except our gratitude.
Well, I didn't know Alex Cuervo. I got to go listen to his episode. I love Alex. He's so talented.
Oh, he's so good.
He did it earlier when talking about scores. This was on the heels of him doing the Pale Door score for us.
He also had never seen Scream or any of the Scream movies. So you're going to be in for a treat on that one. And like Shawn said, you win nothing except our gratitude, which I'm pretty sure is what we said when we actually worked with him on Revealer. We said, Michael, thank you for you get nothing other than our gratitude.
I got a movie.
We're consistent. We're nothing if not consistent.
Got a writing credit on a feature film.
Yeah. There's a movie out there. That's reward enough. Doing this is reward enough. This has been a blast. And you guys, I'm not going to say yet, but you guys might have a part to be playing a role in the Filmographers podcast. I don't know. But I've heard something. So we'll have to keep our eye out for that.
That's right. Both of our listeners are going to come over for that episode now. So you're gonna steal both of our listeners.
It's the crossover event of the fall, guys.
It is. Not since Urkel showed up on Full House has there been a crossover event this exciting.
It's our own Elmore Leonard verse that Soderbergh has played in a few times.
That's right. It's all coming together. See that? It's all work.
Yeah.
But yes, Michael, thank you again for the time. We will let you go. You have a nice vacation to take here that we were keeping you from. So without further ado, we will release you.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was a blast.
Certainly. We're glad you got to see Hoosiers. You were late to the party, but we're glad you made it, and glad you liked it.
So silly. Thanks. I didn't watch it till now.
Thanks, Michael. Always a pleasure, sir. We'll chat soon.
Yes, sir. Go see Breaking Away on the other side of your vacation.
I will.
All right. See you, dude.
Later, Michael. Take it easy, bud.
Take care. Our thanks again to Michael Moreci. We are a fan of his. He's a talented gentleman, talented writer. I have a handful of his comics and trades on my shelf, in fact. And yes, co-writer of Revealer, Paper Street Pictures movie, which you can find on Shudder, on DVD. Wrapping up here, Hoosiers, we usually do a little bit of by the numbers. Speaking of which, Rad Recommendations does the same thing. Check that out on YouTube if you've not already. It's a little branch off from our Scare Package universe on the Paper Street Pictures YouTube channel. But in a similar by the numbers vein, Hoosiers box office. This film opened in November of 1986. It did not actually see a wide release until February of 87, where it made almost all of its eventual $28.6 million box office haul, which is not terrible. But you mentioned where this ranks among sports movies. I did a little crunching of that. So Hoosiers ranked number 24 in Newsweek's 25 best sports movies of all time.
Okay, that's a terrible list.
Hold on, it gets better. I'm going up. I'm going up. Number 22 in Vulture's 50 best sports movies of all time. Number 17 in Collider's 30 best sports movies of all time. And again, recency bias plays into these lists.
This is just making me mad so far. You better be getting to the good
13 in Rolling Stone's 30 best sports movies of all time.
We're getting somewhere.
Number 12 in Time Out's 50 best sports movies of all time. Number 4 in AFI's 10 best sports movies of all time by the Real Film People.
Now we're
and
cooking.
then unranked in Forbes' best 42 list. But don't worry, Challengers and Uncut Gems did make that list.
Oh, Forbes, you dead to me.
Uncut Gems, you know that great sports movie, Uncut Gems.
Just because Kevin Garnett's in your movie does not make it a
basketball's on a
movie.
TV screen.
Jesus Christ, I can't even with that. That is, that's not okay.
AI Friday ranking at number 4 seems right.
There's no world where you can sell me this is not a top 10 sports movie. Look, you know, everyone's a little different. You can tell me it's number 1. You can tell me it's number 10. You can tell me it's number 5. If you tell me it's number 32, you're wrong. You're just wrong.
Well, again, when I was looking up best of list, just sports movie best of list, they ranked in everything except that Forbes one. But yeah, 24 out of 25 in Newsweek. I don't know what that's about. 22 out of 50 in Vulture. That's a little low. I'm with you. It should be in the top 10. I don't know where, but it's not far behind a couple of the top boxing movies and a couple of the top baseball movies. So yeah. I
mean, there's like, I mean, we talked about them with Michael, but there's like 6 or 7 movies that you just can't not have in your top 10 sports movies. They're just they're too good. They're too influential. They're too everything. Like you can't do something like this and not have Field of Dreams, The Natural, you know, Raging Bull, Rocky. Like you just can't. So yeah. I don't know what's ahead of them on some of these lists, but they're wrong.
Agreed.
Unless it's Side Out. C. Thomas Howell's Side Out. That I will allow.
Yes, unless it's niche 80s sports that got a movie made about them.
Yes, unless it's like skiing or
BMX and Rad. And all those.
True. I forgot about Rad.
Never forget about Rad.
Now we're just rambling.
Thunder in your heart. So
let's end this. Let's put this thing out of its misery.
Let's do it. Like Dennis Hopper. Just crash out. Crash out
not
in the snow in the middle of the winter. Yes, this has been a presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Thank you again to Michael Moreci, who was late to the party, but we're very glad he made it. For Cameron Burns, I am Shawn Talley. Thank you for listening to this nonsense, and don't be late to the party.
No school this small's ever been to the state championship.
God wants you on the floor.